All right, everybody. Stocks by the numbers. Welcome back. We have 2 minutes to go before the close. I wanted to do a quick update here on SoundHound AI, ticker symbol SOUN here on the Nasdaq. Stock right now 5.25, up about 20 cents, a little over 4% here on the day. But I just wanted to go over again just these trend lines that I'm watching, and I wanted to look at how the stock performed today. So, as I mentioned, this was the previous resistance level that we were holding, and then you see that we broke, and of course, connecting the tops back here, Feb 27 to Feb 29, March 1st, connecting across those tops, extending that trend line. You can see that it's been trying to fight and bounce and stay above that trend line. Today, it had a nice pop up, even getting above this purple trend line here. This one's going back to... This one's going back to, again, connecting the tops from February 8th, 9th, 23 to June 29th, 23. And then I just kind of extended that out. And you can see that we've been bouncing up and down off of that line here for the last couple of days. So if we look at today, how the stock opened, you can see that we jumped up above that support trend line, and then we immediately broke down below it, and then markets began to rally, and Sound absolutely exploded, going up to 580 a share. And then, of course, markets basically reversed and began to really sell off, and you can see that the stock has completely pulled back. Just closed here at 528, up 23 cents, about 4.5%. So, in my opinion, it looks like it wants to be up. However, again, the problem is the markets were really pumping to help this out, and then as soon as we reversed, it looks like it gave most of it back. But still closing up here, almost a quarter of a point, in my opinion, looking pretty good. However, it does look like it may want to retest this trend line. So if we fast forward now into tomorrow, as you see, you're looking at maybe 513, 512 potentially on the pullback for SoundHound. And if we switch over here, this is a 1-month chart, and you can see if we break below that 513, you can see 483, potentially 461. And this next trend line here, if we immediately drop down, would be right around 4.5. But of course, I did also mention that before we took that next leg higher, we really did bounce around that $3.99, $4 level. So I am kind of expecting a potential retracement to about the $4 level. And of course, I mentioned worst case scenario, we do have this potential gap fill. I believe it was back to about 243 or something, 245, around that range. But we do have multiple trend lines, along the way for us to potentially bounce off of. But I just wanted to do a quick update here, just pointing out some of these levels, because in my opinion, regardless, I do still think it's a buy. And like I always say, if you start buying up here at $5 and then you add at $4, and if it happens to chunk back down to 2.5 and fill that gap, in my opinion, you should view that as an opportunity. You really shouldn't be viewing that as a negative, because it seems like the word is out and everyone seems to be pretty bullish and pretty optimistic about what SoundHound is going to do in the long term. So in my opinion, I think it's more about taking a position and getting involved, as opposed to just trying to precisely pick your points. Or like I said, if you buy today at 527 and then it dips down to this 50-day before bouncing back up, maybe if you buy today and it drops down, in my opinion, like I say, I really wouldn't personally view that as a negative, because I feel like a lot of people are missing the bigger picture. Now, if you happen to get in down here at 2, and then it ran up to 8, 9, and you took profits, that's very understandable. But in my opinion, this is hands down a long-term investment, in my opinion. So the goal with this situation, which is what I said, in my opinion, this whole time here, that it was in this tight little range, is that you should be accumulating shares and building a position for the longer term. Now, granted, this could have been an overreaction, and instead of going up to, 10, we probably should have only gone up to maybe 6. But we understand how the markets work. People missed out. They see how much it's running. They start to jump in, right? We had a big rally up. We start to pull back. So everyone starts to step in and buy the dip, and then we take the next leg higher. So, that's why it could have short-term pops like this. And if you want to secure some profits, depending on your financial situation, in my opinion, I understand that. But again, long-term, I really do think this is going to be a huge winner. Now, we were already up about double from where we are here, almost hitting 10.25. and that brought the market cap to 3.2 billion. And that's why, even though the revenue is still light, we're talking tens of millions, right? So even though the revenue is still light, of course, as you see, if the markets decide to sell off from these ridiculous highs, in my opinion, and we start to come back down to earth, then absolutely you will see something like SoundHound break through these trend lines, in my opinion, drop down to the 4, and potentially even gap fill, depending on how much the markets do pull back. But I will say again, in my opinion, that is an opportunity, not a negative. But here, looking at the daily, we can see potentially next stop maybe 468 on the moving average, which, yeah, that's why we could potentially break 468, which would bring us down, below this fib, potentially like 455 here at this trend line. And then we could potentially bounce in between these trend lines before possibly breaking back up and out, or potentially breaking down. But obviously, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but we can see the MACD has really started to fall off here the last couple of weeks. The stock obviously went on a massive run, and now I'm sure there are a bunch of people taking profits as well, but we didn't quite close at the bottom of the day range. Again, we stayed up, closing 4.5%, so we don't have a bearish hammer or anything like that, in my opinion, that we really have to keep an eye on. But I will say, maybe like right there, see the bottom of that, see, right? Because we had the big explosion, we consolidated, boom, we took the next leg higher, then we had a sell-off, and then boom, we took the next leg higher. So where did this sell off to? As you see, the low, 477. 477. And I know it's not precise to the penny, but 477 on the low, so we could potentially retest that same range, which would be right around the 50-day moving average. If it takes, a couple of days to pull back, potentially, you could see the 50-day moving average climb up to above 470, and then they would kind of meet in line and potentially, I mean, it might not precisely form the double bottom, but like I'm saying, it may meet up around that price, and it may meet up with the 50-day, and then we could potentially have a bounce and go back up higher. But the RSI obviously was up here at, 90, and now we've pulled back about half of that. So we're back middle of the road here. RSI a touch below 45 on the daily. So unfortunately, it's kind of mid-range, and it could go either way. Same thing on the weekly. The RSI was up here into the 80s. Now we pulled back to 58. So the curling on the MACD taking place. So the sell-off could continue. But like I said, in my opinion, it looks like these are the trend lines to keep an eye on. And of course, you have the 50-day moving average on the daily. The mid-Bollinger Band here on the weekly, 351. So this is going what? This is going a week out. So yeah, I don't know, 351. That would be like here. But that would be about almost 3 weeks from today. So we could slowly pull back to that 351 level around there, bounce off of the trend line, and then possibly head back higher. But like I said, I just want you to keep in mind, again, you see the way that this reversed midday as markets really began to chunk down. And I mentioned that, in my opinion, markets have really been flying for reasons unbeknownst to me. So that's why I always say, when you have a stock that ran up and if you could make the argument that it's overinflated in the numbers, then if markets start to drop down, it will inevitably sell off, in my opinion. Right? And we saw something similar, not to change the subject, but just very quickly, we saw something similar with ELF, right? ELF, we looked at after they posted earnings, and I said, in my opinion, it's a buy, right? It looks great. It's growing like crazy. I know the PE was a little high at the time or whatever, but off of the momentum of the growth in revenue and the rate at which they're coming in above these analyst expectations, I said, in my opinion, I would be a buyer, probably looking for about 200. And you can see that the stock ran up and hit a new 52-week high of 221.83. Right? So at this point, we could potentially make the argument that the stock was overvalued, which is why, if we zoom in, even after they beat, you can see the stock immediately actually dropped down. And then it went into like this downward consolidated channel, and then we started to climb up and break up to new heights. So that's why a situation like this if a stock is overvalued and the markets do begin to sell off and correct, these are the stocks that are going to come down first, in my opinion, and come down the most. But, just wanted to give you guys a quick little example, just looking at some different companies. But SoundHound really looks like it's staying tight and really trying to stay above these trend lines. So that's why I constantly keep coming back to do these updates for you guys, just to show you where these levels could potentially be. So if we stay down, because we technically closed below this purple trend line, the next stop could be basically where it was at the open, right? See how it opened and then went below that trend line. So we could potentially keep dropping down again. You're looking at maybe like 512, 511. And of course, if we keep going again, we could potentially see 4.5, which would maybe bring us back down to that $4 level. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up of a couple of points that I'm watching here. There really isn't much news from SoundHound from the last time we looked at it, not too long ago. SoundHound to deploy chat AI automotives and cars. We spoke about this last time. SoundHound AI rolls out first chat GPT enabled voice assistant in Japanese vehicles. And we also know that there was that partnership with NVIDIA as well to have that voice AI assistant in the car without a connection required, which in my opinion is pretty cool. But if we switch over here to the pivot points, we can see we're looking at the weekly, and you can see the pivot point right there, 4.5. And if we switch over here to the daily, again, we have our 50-day moving average of 468. And as I said, look, if we come right down here, look, this is Friday midday, 1 p.m. tomorrow. You can see we're about 4.5, right? So that's what I mean. Some of these sell-offs, believe it or not, are actually healthy. So that's why I always say, if we think we have a winner and a long-term grower on our hands, when you have these sell-offs, these pullbacks, these corrections, whatever you want to label it as, when you have the pullback, in my opinion, you should be viewing that as an opportunity, not as a negative. But in my eyes, I do potentially see the 4.5 level incoming, or at least maybe that 468 daily 50-day moving average, where we could potentially bounce off of. But yeah, 468, and what was weekly again? 4.5. And that's what I mean. See how we paused right there before taking that next big chunk higher? That's why I am kind of expecting a potential pullback to $4 a share. But even here at $5, I mean, I do like it for the longer term. And if we turn around several years from now and we see that it's a huge player in the space and everyone wishes that they got a part of it and they're signing deals with this company and that company and that company, then obviously the stock is going to continue to fly, in my opinion. And you're not going to come back and say, oh, I bought it 5 and then it dipped to 4.25 before running up. You know, I could have got it for a better price. You understand what I'm saying? We always go down this road, and that's why I feel like it's not worth it's not worth stepping over dollars to pick up pennies, if you will. And that's why, like I always say, when we're dealing with a nice potential long-term grower like this, the goal really is to be involved and just accumulate as many shares as possible, and not necessarily kind of just beat yourself up over any potential slight pullbacks that you might see in the stock in the short term. And, you may have to deal with short-term volatility for long-term growth. But this is a prime example. This is why I always say be very, very careful of fake BS pumping markets that are rising, in my opinion, for absolutely no reason. Because as soon as they decide to flip the switch and everything goes red, all of a sudden you had a high flyer that was having a phenomenal day that all of a sudden pulled back to almost where it started. Now, again, I understand that it still closed up about 4.33%. But of course, that is because, in my opinion, it was up so much, right? So hypothetically, see how it hit here and then it paused at this level and then had the next leg higher. And obviously it came right back down there again and tried to hold before breaking that level and going lower. So let's say it only ran up to around here, right? And it tried to break above this trend line, but it kind of stayed flat, let's just say, for all of these hours. Now, here at around 2 o'clock, when we got that Fed news, instead of being up so much and coming back, but still being up 4% from this point, it would have immediately broke and probably came straight down to this trend line and potentially even broke that, right? So in my mind, this stock actually should have closed either flat or red today, but it was up so much. That's why it only pulled back and is still green on the day. So that's why I'm just giving a heads up. If you're asking me, can it go lower? The answer is absolutely yes, in my opinion. Not a doubt in my mind. Because if we have a drop even half of this tomorrow, then this stock will more than likely drop and break below this trend line and potentially meet up with the next bottom trend line again, maybe around that 4.5 mark. But this is there's a 1 month chart, and you can see we have a fib here, 483. Let's see if we back up a little bit. 3 month chart, fib 483. 6 month chart, we're below the fibs. 1 year chart, you can see bottom fib 477, right? So we're seeing a lot of 480s, 470s. The 50-day moving average, right, was 463, I believe. 468, I'm sorry. So, and of course, the bottom trend line here, again, if we pull back around 450, right? So we have this range, 450, 468, 473. So we have that range of multiple points within about that 20-cent range. So that's why I'm saying, in my opinion, I think they are going to slowly pull it back and sell it off. But like I said, I mean, you know, if we liked it still at 6 and at 5, if they pull it back to 4 or potentially gap fill back here to $2.50, $3, you know, obviously if we liked it at 6 and 5, we're going to love it down at 4 and 3. So, you know, just a little update there. But again, there were supposed speculation, people talking about how big the healthcare AI sector is going to be, right? So if this company is one of the leaders in the sector of voice AI assistants, then I'm sure we can all see the potential of where this could possibly be inside of the next 2, 3, 5 years down the road. And in my opinion, I do still like it. We could make the argument that it's a little high in value, but in my opinion, I am still personally bullish on it. Stock went to $10. I mean, I think, in my opinion, if you give this a clean 24 months, I know it sounds like a lot of time, but it really isn't. But in my opinion, I think if you give this a clean 24 months, I think we can easily be looking at a stock that'll be above $20 a share. Especially if, again, 1 or 2 new partnerships are announced, new deals are announced. Again, every time any little catalyst came out, the stock was climbing day by day, running all the way up to above $10 a share. I know there were talks online. People were looking for a squeeze, potentially up to $16, $18 a share. That's what I mean. So if anything like that happens, we could potentially see mid to high teens just off of a short squeeze or momentum coming off of positive catalysts. But if the company actually continues to grow itself organically, and again, I have to remind you, the CEO stated they were approached multiple times to get bought out. This is what I mean. So that means, in my opinion, we know there's value here. That's why I'm saying you give this a clean 24, 30, 36 months. Yes, it sounds like a long time, but in my opinion, my personal price target, probably $30 a share. If you ask me a couple of years from now where it's going to be, I think it's going to be $25, $30 a share. But that's just my opinion. But obviously, if you agree, disagree, see something that I'm not seeing, if you're looking for a different price level to jump in that I didn't mention, obviously, let us know down in the comment section below. That's what it's for. And basically, I'm going to end it there. So once again, this is Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually very quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky and volatile and very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone was able to keep their head above water here on today's day on the sell-off, because I'm sure if you've been following my channel and actually listening to just some of the personal advice that I'm giving out to you guys, then I would hope that as markets reversed, you guys were positioned in nice hedges like the VIX or VXX calls, which tracks the volatility index of the S&P 500. And of course, we have other hedges like gold and silver to potentially, make us money as stocks go down. We can see we had a nice jump in oil as everything else started to reverse and drop down. Oil began to climb up. So that's why, I know it could be viewed as a boring sector, like, oh, you're holding metals as a hedge, or oh, you're holding an oil position as a hedge, or you're holding the VIX and it's always down because markets keep going up. I understand that frustration and the fact that in the moment it seems like it may not be worth it, and you may question yourself as to why you bought it. But then all it takes is 1, 2, 3 days like this. And now you look at a situation like this where as markets began to drop down, if you simply just bought the VIX, you would have made yourself 13, 14, 15% as the rest of your portfolio was more than likely selling off and taking hits. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why, again, I know a lot of these plays may be viewed as boring, or people don't want to say that big sell-offs and negativity can happen, so people don't look for it and they hope it doesn't happen and they just continue to ride that bullish wave. But like I said, in my opinion, it's always worth it to have 1 or 2 hedge plays, and if you can have a couple of positions making money as everything else is selling off and pulling back, then in my opinion, you're going to be in an even better position than someone who just owns great stocks across the board. Because I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these nice big growing stocks. But again, on a day like today where markets pull back, if you have no hedge in place, then you are literally just giving away profits that you earned. And that's why I always say, in my opinion, you have to work smarter, not harder. But that's it. I'm going to end it there. So thanks for stopping by. Sub up, like up. And I know it's volatile, but I want you to stay strong, stay positive, stay focused, stay confident. And thanks for stopping by. Have a good day.